The morning sun cast long shadows across the dirt square of Fort Laramie as Anna stood on the wooden platform, her bare feet aching against the splintered boards. She had stopped counting the days since the traders took her from the burned remains of her family's wagon. Her parents lay somewhere on the prairie, buried shallow or not at all. The memory lived behind her eyes like smoke that would not clear. Now she stood among barrels of whiskey and stacks of beaver pelts, just another item for sale in this godforsaken place where the frontier swallowed souls whole. The iron collar around her neck marked her as property, its weight a constant reminder that she no longer belonged to herself. She was 16 years old, though she felt centuries older. The crowd gathered slowly, a mix of trappers with wild beards, soldiers in dusty blue uniforms, and trading post merchants who saw profit in everything. Anna kept her eyes fixed on the horizon where the black hills rose like dark teeth against the pale sky. She had learned not to look at the men who examined her. Their eyes crawled over her skin, assessing her worth like she was a horse or a rifle. The auctioneer, a fat man named Cootie with tobacco-stained teeth, grabbed her arm and yanked her forward. His fingers left bruises that would bloom purple by nightfall. He shouted numbers and descriptions, selling her strength, her youth, her ability to cook and clean and bear children. Anna felt her soul retreating deeper inside her chest, hiding in a place these men could never reach no matter what they did to her body. Then the crowd parted. A Lakota chief walked through the mass of unwashed bodies like a blade cutting silk. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting his place in the world. His name was Mapia Luta, which Anna would later learn meant Red Cloud, though this was a different man from the famous war leader who shared that name. He wore traditional dress decorated with quill work that caught the morning light, and his long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers earned through deeds Anna could only imagine. His face was weathered and strong, with eyes that seemed to see through the surface of things into their hidden truth. He was perhaps 40 winters old, a man in the prime of his power and influence. When those eyes found Anna, something shifted in the air between them. The bidding started low. A trapper offered 3 jugs of whiskey. A soldier countered with $5 in gold coin. Cootie's voice rose and fell in practiced rhythm, coaxing higher offers from the crowd like a snake charmer working his deadly art. Anna felt herself disappearing, becoming nothing more than a transaction, a piece of paper changing hands. She wondered if this was how death felt, this gradual erasure of everything that made you human. Then Mapia Luta raised his hand. He offered 20 pelts of prime beaver, a fortune in this economy where fur was currency and gold was scarce. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed nervously. Cootie's eyes gleamed with greed as he asked for more bids, but no one spoke. The trappers and soldiers knew better than to challenge a Lakota chief over a white girl, especially one who commanded the respect that radiated from Mapia Luta like heat from a fire. Cootie declared the sale complete. He removed the iron collar from Anna's neck, and for a moment she felt lighter, though she knew one form of bondage was simply being replaced by another. Mapia Luta approached the platform. He did not grab her or drag her down like Cootie had. Instead, he extended his hand, palm up, offering rather than demanding. Anna stared at that hand for a long moment. It was scarred and calloused, the hand of a warrior and a hunter, but there was something in the gesture that felt different from anything she had experienced since the traders took her. She placed her trembling fingers in his palm, and he helped her down from the platform with unexpected gentleness. As her feet touched the ground, she looked up into his face and saw something she had not seen in weeks, humanity looking back at her. They rode west from Fort Laramie into country that grew wilder with each passing mile. Mapia Luta had given Anna a horse, a gentle mare with kind eyes, and this simple act confused her more than cruelty would have. She sat the saddle awkwardly at first, her body stiff with fear and exhaustion, but the horse seemed to understand her inexperience and moved with patient care beneath her. The chief rode ahead on a powerful painted stallion, never looking back, yet she sensed his awareness of her like a rope connecting them across the distance. 2 of his warriors flanked them, young men who watched the horizon with the practiced vigilance of those who knew danger lived in every shadow and ravine. They did not speak to Anna, but neither did they treat her with the contempt she had grown accustomed to from the white traders. Their indifference felt like a blessing after weeks of predatory attention. The landscape transformed around them as they traveled deeper into Lakota territory. Rolling grasslands gave way to broken country where red rock formations thrust up from the earth like the bones of ancient giants. Pine forests thick with shadow spread across hillsides where elk bugled their lonely calls. Anna had never seen country so vast and untamed. It frightened her and thrilled her in equal measure. At night they camped without fire to avoid drawing attention from enemies, both white and indigenous, who roamed these disputed lands. Anna lay wrapped in a buffalo robe that Mapia Luta had provided, staring up at stars so bright and numerous they seemed like holes in the fabric of heaven. She wondered what awaited her in the Lakota camp. Would she become a slave there, working until her hands bled and her back broke? Would she be passed among the warriors like the traders had threatened to do before the chief bought her? The questions circled in her mind like vultures over carrion. On the third day, Mapia Luta finally spoke to her. They had stopped beside a creek to water the horses, and he approached where she knelt drinking from cupped hands. His voice was deep and carried an accent that made English sound like a foreign song. He asked if she could understand him. Anna nodded, though his words came slowly and his grammar was imperfect. He explained that he had learned English from missionaries who came to his people years ago, before the wars made such exchanges impossible. He told her his name and asked for hers. When she whispered it, her voice cracking from disuse, something flickered in his expression that might have been sympathy or might have been recognition of shared pain. He told her she would be safe in his lodge, that no harm would come to her there. Anna wanted to believe him, but trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. As they continued west, Mapia Luta began to teach her words in Lakota. He pointed to things and spoke their names, Mi for water, Sunka for horse, Mapia for cloud. Anna repeated them carefully, her tongue struggling with sounds that had no equivalent in English. Language became a bridge between them, fragile but growing stronger with each exchange. She learned that he was a chief of a small band, respected but not powerful in the way of the great leaders whose names echoed across the plains. His wife had died 2 winters past from the coughing sickness that white men brought, leaving him alone with grief that sat in his chest like a stone. He had no children, though he had hoped for many. When Anna asked why he had bought her at the fort, he was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said that when he looked at her on that platform, he saw someone whose spirit was being crushed, and he remembered his wife's face in her final days when the sickness stole her breath and her dignity. He could not save his wife, but perhaps he could save this white girl who reminded him that suffering was the common language of all people. On the evening of the 5th day, they crested a ridge and Anna saw the Lakota camp spread below them in a valley where a river bent like a silver snake. There were perhaps 40 lodges arranged in a great circle, their painted buffalo hide walls glowing in the sunset. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and children played near the water while women worked at stretching hides and preparing food. Dogs barked at their approach, and people began to emerge from their lodges to see who had arrived. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She was about to enter a world completely foreign to everything she had known, among people who had every reason to hate someone who looked like her. The wars between whites and Indians had filled both sides with bitterness and rage. Massacres and raids had painted the frontier red with blood that would not wash clean. Yet Mapia Luta rode down into that camp with his shoulders straight and his head high, and Anna followed because she had no other choice. As they entered the circle of lodges, faces turned toward them. Some showed curiosity, others suspicion, and a few displayed open hostility. Anna felt their eyes on her pale skin and light hair like brands burning marks into her flesh. She was the enemy here, a representative of the people who were destroying the Lakota way of life, killing the buffalo, breaking the treaties, and pushing ever westward with their insatiable hunger for land. She had never felt more alone, yet when Mapia Luta glanced back at her, his expression held something that might have been encouragement or might have been a promise that she could not yet understand. The chief's lodge stood at the western edge of the camp, its hide walls painted with images of horses and thunderbirds in colors that had weathered to soft earth tones. Mapia Luta dismounted and gestured for Anna to do the same. Her legs trembled as they touched the ground, weak from days of riding and from fear that lived in her bones like winter cold. An old woman emerged from the lodge, her face a map of wrinkles that spoke of laughter and sorrow in equal measure. She looked at Anna with eyes sharp as obsidian arrowheads, seeing everything in a single glance. This was Wikapi, which meant star, and she was Mapia Luta's aunt who had moved into his lodge after his wife's death to manage his household and provide the wisdom of her years. She spoke rapidly in Lakota, her words flowing too fast for Anna to catch more than fragments, but her tone carried questions and objections that needed no translation. Mapia Luta answered his aunt with calm authority, explaining his decision in words Anna could not understand but whose meaning she could guess. The old woman listened, then turned her penetrating gaze back to Anna. She stepped closer, reaching out to touch Anna's hair, which hung in tangled pale waves around her shoulders. Wikapi made a sound that might have been disapproval or might have been simple observation. Then she nodded once and spoke to Mapia Luta before disappearing back into the lodge. The chief told Anna to come inside. She ducked through the entrance into a space that smelled of sage smoke and tanned leather. The interior was larger than she expected, with a fire pit at the center where smoke rose toward the opening at the lodge's peak. Buffalo robes lay arranged around the perimeter, and parfleshes decorated with geometric designs held the household's belongings. It was clean and orderly, a home that spoke of people who took pride in their space despite the hardships of their nomadic life. Wikapi immediately set about transforming Anna. She brought a bowl of warm water and began washing the girl's face and hands, scrubbing away layers of dirt and despair with surprising gentleness. She examined Anna's arms where bruises from Cootie's rough handling still showed purple and yellow against pale skin, and she made clicking sounds of sympathy or disgust. Then she produced a dress made of soft deerskin, decorated with blue beads and patterns that caught the firelight. Anna had worn nothing but rags for weeks, and the feel of clean, well-made clothing against her skin almost brought tears. Wikapi combed out Anna's hair with patient determination, working through the snarls and tangles until it fell smooth down her back. The old woman's hands were gnarled with age but moved with practiced skill, and Anna found herself relaxing under the ministrations, her body remembering what it felt like to be cared for rather than violated. Over the following days, Anna learned the rhythms of the lodge and the camp. Wikapi became her teacher in all things, showing her how to prepare pemmican from dried meat and berries, how to scrape buffalo hides until they were soft enough for clothing, how to gather the right plants for medicine and food. The old woman spoke only Lakota, forcing Anna to learn quickly or remain lost in incomprehension. It was exhausting and often frustrating, but Anna discovered she had an aptitude for the language. Words and phrases began to stick in her memory, building a vocabulary that allowed her to understand simple conversations and express basic needs. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done in her previous life as a farmer's daughter, but it gave her days structure and purpose. She fell into her blankets each night too tired to dream, and this was a mercy because her dreams when they came were filled with fire and screaming. Mapia Luta treated her with a formality that confused her. He never touched her except in the most necessary circumstances, never looked at her with the hunger she had seen in other men's eyes. He spent his days with the other chiefs and warriors, discussing hunting and war, making the decisions that guided the band through these dangerous times. In the evenings he would return to the lodge and sit by the fire, sometimes speaking with his aunt in quiet tones, sometimes sitting in silence while he worked on arrows or repaired his weapons. Occasionally he would teach Anna more words, or tell her stories about Lakota history and belief. He spoke of Wakantanka, the great mystery that moved through all things. He described the sacred hoop of life and how every creature had its place in the great circle. He told her of heroes and tricksters, of Ictomy the spider and how the buffalo came to the people. These stories opened a window into a worldview so different from her Christian upbringing that it felt like discovering a new color in the rainbow. The people of the camp watched Anna with mixed feelings that played across their faces like clouds across the sky. Some ignored her completely, refusing to acknowledge her existence. Others showed curiosity, especially the children who stared at her pale skin and light hair as if she were a creature from legend. A few showed open hatred, and Anna understood this completely. How many of these people had lost family members to white soldiers or settlers? How many had watched their hunting grounds destroyed, their sacred sites desecrated, their people killed or driven away? She represented all of that pain and loss, and no amount of deerskin clothing or Lakota words could erase the color of her skin or the people she came from. Yet slowly, incrementally, she began to find her place in this alien world. Wikapi's acceptance seemed to provide a shield of sorts, and Mapia Luta's obvious protection kept the more hostile elements at bay. Anna worked hard, kept her head down, and tried to prove through actions rather than words that she meant no harm. She was not yet part of this community, but perhaps she was no longer quite the enemy either. She existed in a liminal space between worlds, belonging fully to neither, and in that strange borderland she began the slow process of discovering who she might become. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with winds that cut through buffalo robes and chilled bones to their marrow. The camp prepared for the hard months ahead by storing dried meat, reinforcing lodges, and ensuring the horse herd had access to sheltered grazing. Anna worked alongside the women, her hands growing calloused and strong from endless labor. She could now speak Lakota well enough to hold simple conversations, and Wikapi had begun to show her something that approached maternal affection. The old woman would sometimes pat Anna's hand after a job well done, or save her the choicest pieces of meat from the communal pot. These small kindnesses meant more than Anna could express. She was still an outsider, still regarded with suspicion by many, but she was no longer invisible. She had become part of the fabric of daily life, woven into the pattern even if the thread was a different color from the rest. Then the soldiers came. It was a gray morning when the outriders spotted them, a column of cavalry moving across the plains like a dark stain spreading over clean cloth. Word ripped through the camp faster than fire through dry grass. Women grabbed children and rushed toward the lodges. Warriors seized their weapons and mounted their horses. The camp descended into controlled chaos as people prepared for either flight or fight. Anna stood frozen near the lodge, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. These were her people coming, white men in blue uniforms who spoke her language and worshipped her God. Yet she felt no surge of relief, no hope of rescue. She felt only dread, because she knew what soldiers did to Indian camps. She had heard the stories whispered around the evening fires, tales of Sand Creek and Washita, of women and children cut down while they ran, of lodges burned with people still inside them. Mapia Luta found her standing there, paralyzed by fear and confusion. He gripped her shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. His voice was urgent but controlled as he told her to get into the lodge and stay hidden. If the soldiers saw her, they might think she was a captive and use her presence as justification for attacking the camp. Or worse, they might believe she had gone native and treat her as a traitor to her race. Either way, her presence could light the fuse that would destroy everything. Anna nodded and stumbled toward the lodge entrance, but something made her look back. She saw Mapia Luta mount his painted stallion, saw him join the other warriors forming a line between the camp and the approaching soldiers. His face was set in an expression of grim determination, and Anna realized with sudden, shocking clarity that this man was willing to die to protect her and everyone else in this camp. The traders who sold her had seen her as property. The soldiers coming across the plain would see her as an excuse for violence. But Mapia Luta had seen her as a person worth saving, and that simple act of recognition had given her back the humanity she thought was lost forever. The soldiers stopped 100 yards from the camp. Their commander was a lieutenant with a young face and hard eyes, the kind of man who had learned to kill Indians and call it duty. Mapia Luta rode out to meet him with 2 elder chiefs, carrying a white strip of cloth to signal peaceful intentions. Anna watched from a gap in the lodge's hide walls, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Wikapi sat beside her, praying in a low voice to the spirits for protection and wisdom. The negotiation lasted an hour that felt like days. Anna could not hear the words exchanged, but she could read the tension in every gesture, every movement. The lieutenant was demanding something, his voice occasionally rising to a shout that carried across the distance. Mapia Luta remained calm, his responses measured and deliberate. The other chief supported him, presenting a united front against whatever accusations or demands the soldiers brought. Finally, miraculously, the soldiers turned and rode away. They did not attack, did not burn, did not kill. As they disappeared over the horizon, a collective breath released from the camp. Warriors lowered their weapons. Women emerged from lodges with children clinging to their skirts. But there was no celebration, no sense of victory. Everyone knew this was merely a postponement, not a resolution. The soldiers would return, if not this column then another, and next time they might not be satisfied with words. The pressure was building, like water behind a dam that grew weaker with each passing season. The Lakota way of life was being squeezed between the inexorable advance of white settlement and the diminishing buffalo herds that were the foundation of their entire existence. This band of Mapia Lutas was small, not part of the larger resistance movements, but that would not save them when the government decided to force all Indians onto reservations where they could be controlled and forgotten. That night, Mapia Luta called Anna to sit with him by the fire. His face was drawn with exhaustion and worry, but his eyes were clear as he looked at her. He told her what the lieutenant had said, that there were reports of white captives in the Lakota camps, that the army was under pressure to recover any women or children held against their will. The lieutenant had demanded permission to search the camp, but Mapia Luta had refused, explaining that such an intrusion would violate their sovereignty and likely trigger violence. He had convinced the officer that no captives were held here, that his band wanted only to be left in peace to live as they always had. The lie had held, but it was fragile as spring ice. Anna understood what he was telling her without him needing to speak it directly. Her presence here was a danger not just to herself but to everyone. She was the match that could burn down this entire world. Spring arrived with the suddenness of a door thrown open, flooding the land with green grass and wildflowers that painted the prairie in colors too brilliant for words. The buffalo returned in scattered herds, and the hunters went out to take what they needed for the coming year. Anna had survived her first winter in the Lakota camp, and the achievement felt monumental. She was no longer the broken girl who stood on the auction block at Fort Laramie. Her body had grown strong from constant work. Her mind had expanded to hold 2 languages, 2 ways of seeing the world. Her spirit, which had retreated so far inside herself she thought it might never return, had begun to cautiously emerge. She could laugh now at Wikapi's jokes, could feel joy in the warmth of the sun and the taste of fresh meat. She had become someone new, forged in the fire of loss and reborn in the lodge of a Lakota chief who had given her something more valuable than freedom. he had given her back her humanity. But the world outside the camp would not leave them in peace. Reports came from other bands of increased military activity, of reservations being established and Indians forced onto them at gunpoint. The buffalo herds were thinning, slaughtered by white hunters who took only the hides and left thousands of tons of meat to rot on the plains. The sacred Black Hills had been violated by gold seekers who swarmed over the land like locusts. The great Lakota leaders were either dead, imprisoned, or fighting desperate regard actions against impossible odds. Mapia Luta's small band could not remain isolated forever. The choice was becoming clear: go to the reservation and accept the slow death of their culture, or resist and face the swift death of military annihilation. It was no choice at all, yet it had to be made. One evening as Anna helped Wikapi prepare the meal, Mapia Luta asked her to walk with him. They left the camp and climbed a nearby hill that overlooked the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for a world so full of pain. They sat on the hillside, and for a long time neither spoke. Then Mapia Luta told Anna a story. He said that when he first saw her on the auction block, he had been on his way back from a failed negotiation with the Indian agent at Fort Laramie. The agent had told him his band must report to the reservation within 2 months or be considered hostile. Mapia Luta had returned to his people with this burden weighing on his soul, not knowing how to lead them through what was coming. Then he saw Anna, and in her broken spirit he recognized his own despair. He bought her because he thought perhaps in saving her, he might find the strength to save his people. Anna listened with tears streaming down her face. She had never understood the full depth of what Mapia Luta had done for her, how his act of mercy was tangled up with his own need for redemption and purpose. She had thought herself saved, but perhaps they had saved each other. He told her that the time had come for her to choose her path. The band would soon have to decide whether to go to the reservation or flee deeper into the wilderness for a few more seasons of freedom. If Anna chose to return to her own people, he would escort her back to the fort and ensure she was delivered safely. No one would force her to stay. But if she chose to remain with the Lakota, she needed to understand what that meant. It meant accepting a life of hardship and uncertainty. It meant possibly dying alongside these people if the worst came. It meant forever being caught between worlds, never fully belonging to either. Anna looked out across the valley where the lodges glowed in the fading light, where the river ran silver between dark banks, where Wikapi was probably wondering where they had gone and whether dinner would burn. She thought about the girl she had been, the daughter of farmers who believed in hard work and Jesus Christ and manifest destiny. That girl was dead, killed on the prairie along with her parents. In her place was someone new, someone who had learned that humanity wore many faces and spoke many languages. She had been sold without a voice, treated as property by men who saw her as less than human. But Mapia Luta had seen her soul when no one else could, and in seeing it, he had helped her find it again. She turned to him, this Lakota chief who had given her more than her life, and spoke in his language with words she chose carefully. She told him that home was not a place but the people who saw you truly and loved you anyway. She said that her people, the whites, had shown her only cruelty and greed, while his people had shown her the possibility of dignity even in suffering. She explained that she could never return to the world she came from because that world had no place for someone who had learned to see beyond the borders of race and nation. If the camp went to the reservation, she would go with them. If they fled into the wilderness, she would ride beside them. And if they chose to fight, she would stand with them even though she did not know if she could kill another white person, because some loyalties ran deeper than blood and some families were chosen rather than born. Mapia Luta listened to her words, and when she finished, he nodded slowly. He told her that she had been given a Lakota name by Wikapi and the elder women, though they had waited to see if she would stay before telling her. They called her Wikoni Teka, which meant new life, because she had died in one world and been born into another. As darkness fell completely and stars emerged overhead, they walked back down the hill together. Anna knew that hard times lay ahead, that the story she was living would likely not have a happy ending in the way white fairy tales did. But she also knew that she had found something precious in this Lakota camp, something worth fighting for even if it was doomed. She had found her voice again, and with it, her soul. The auction block at Fort Laramie belonged to another lifetime, another girl. The woman walking beside Mapia Luta back toward the lodge where Wikapi waited had chosen her fate with open eyes. She had been sold as property, but she had bought herself back with courage and determination. The Lakota Chief had given her the opportunity, but she had seized it and made it her own. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever trials the future held, she would face them as Wikoni Teka, new life, a woman who belonged to herself and to the people who had taught her that freedom was not something granted by others but something claimed by the strength of your own spirit. The firelight beckoned from the lodge, and she walked toward it with purpose, ready to embrace whatever destiny she had chosen for herself in this wild, beautiful, terrible land.